Okay, so let's remind ourselves of the order of how we light Shabbat candles. First, we light them, then we um, cover our eyes and say the blessing, and then when we uncover our eyes, it's as if we just lit them now. The reason why we do this thing, even though usually we say Over Le'asiyatan, which means you say the blessing, then you put on tefillin, you say the blessing, then you put up the mezuzah, and we flip over the etrog during Sukkot to make sure that we can start the mitzvah properly after saying the blessing. And so usually that is the way we do things. But on Shabbat, because by saying the blessing, Asher Kidsham Tzitav Tzivanu La'adlik Ner Shel Shabbat, it makes we are taking in Shabbat and we can't light the matches or the candles after that. So we cover our eyes, and then when we uncover them, it's as if we just lit them, and that is the way to do it. So all of that is related to the preparing for Shabbat, which we talked about a few months ago, and now in reference to the melacha of mav'ir, of lighting a fire, we'll bring in a few more details, a few more mitzvot, halachot that are related to the Shabbos candles. So while a candle is burning at home, one must be careful not to open a window or door facing it, as the wind may blow out the flame. Even if the wind outside is currently too weak to put out a candle, one still may not open a window, since it might happen that at the very moment when the window is opened, the wind will become stronger and blow out the candle. If this happens, it would mean that the act of opening the window blew out the candle. When there is no wind whatsoever, some permit opening the window, while others forbid it, just like we talked about a little bit yesterday, of not reading with the light of an oil candle on Shabbat. In a case of necessity, such as when it is too hot outside the room, hot inside the room, one may follow the lenient position and the window may be opened. And so it just gives a brief relief from the heat. One may open a window or door if even a strong wind would be unable to extinguish the candles. For example, if the candle is at a great distance from the window or door, or if the wind is at such an angle that very little wind comes through it. Even if the wind is likely to affect the flame and cause it to flicker, as long as it is not powerful enough to blow it out, one may open the door or window, and that's already in the Shulchan Aruch. If Shabbat candles were lit in front of an open window and then the wind started blowing, the window may be closed in order to protect the flame. By closing the window, one is not acting directly on the flame itself. One is merely preventing the wind from blowing it out. And that is the addition of the Ramah to that Halacha in Shulchan Aruch. Similarly, one may close a door in a place where a fire is burning, such as a room with a fireplace, even if the wind coming in is blowing on the coals and fanning the flame, and closing the door will weaken the fire. Closing the door is not considered an act of extinguishing, since it merely prevents more wind from entering and feeding the flame. In contrast, if the fire is fueled by gas or kerosene, one may not turn down the flow of the fuel. This truly qualifies as extinguishing, since one is acting directly on the fuel itself. And let us remind ourselves that on Yantev, we are allowed to raise or lower the flame of such ovens or lamps. So let's go into the idea of mechaber. So if you remember, we talked about how normally if we do something that is only destructive, it is patur v'asur. It's forbidden rabbinically. But with the extinguishing of fire, the rabbis learned that it had a purpose of itself to blow out the fire, and that study told us that we are making coals and stuff like that. Then that's why extinguishing the fire is melacha shetzricha lagufa, a act of labor that is necessary for its actual goal. So, extinguishing a fire in order to produce charcoal is one of the 39 melachot prohibited on Shabbat. In the Mishkan, they would turn wood into charcoal by setting fire to wood and then extinguishing it. If you remember, we also talked about in a totally different context about the Ktoret, the incense, where we actually do blow out the fire so that we can have the coals on the pan to burn the incense on the Mizbeach HaZahav in the sanctuary, in the Mishkan. They would then use this charcoal to build a steady and long-lasting fire for preparing the dyes used to color the curtains in the Mishkan. Similarly, if one extinguishes the flame of a candle so that its wick will light more easily later on, he transgresses a Torah prohibition. And the way that it's written in the second chapter of Shabbat, B'mem which some of us have the custom to say on Friday night, is Kechas al Hashemen, Kechas al Ptila, that it looks like you are trying to make sure that there's oil left over, or you want the wick, just like you gave the example now, then that is forbidden according to the Torah. What about one who extinguishes a fire not because he wants the charcoal, but because he wants to conserve fuel, which is what we just talked about from Bamim Madlikin, or because the light produced by the flame is bothering him? In other words, he is not essentially interested in putting out the fire. He simply does not want the candle to keep burning. The Tanaim disagree about this, according to Rabbi Shimon, since this is a melacha she'ena tzricha gufa, a act of labor that is not needed for its own sake, for its own purpose. It is only prohibited rabbinically. However, according to Rabbi Yehuda, even if one's objective is not the performance of the malacha itself, since he does in fact intend to extinguish the flame, he has performed a malacha and violates Torah law. So, how would we differentiate if it's rabbinical or biblical? The example that is given is the example of the chole. If somebody is truly sick and we need to break Shabbat for this person, then all of those melachot are permitted. But if somebody is just weak, or what's called chole she'en lo sakana, they have a serious headache or whatever. So if it was rabbinically to blow out the candle, and right now this person's well-being is that he doesn't want the candle in the room because he can't fall asleep or such, then if it was rabbinic, then we are allowed with a shinoi to extinguish the flame in order for this person to be able to sleep. Again, it's the idea of chole she'en bo sakana, chole sheyesh bo sakana, that there's a danger for their life. We break Shabbat in all the different malachot, and because life is more important than observing Shabbat. And so we'll stop here, and I hope that we all were able to understand those two halachot.